Hi, everybody. Welcome to GW Center for Integrative Medicine YouTube channel. I'm your co-host, Dr. Kogan. I have an exciting topic for today. Topic is, well, you've heard that cannabis is bad for the brain, that cannabis can make us dumb, that cannabis is dangerous for the growing brain. Um, there's truth to that to some extent, but there's also a new evidence suggesting that cannabis potentially is a critical part of keeping our brain aging slower. In fact, I've always believed, based on some preliminary data, that cannabis one day will become a part of the treatment for pretty much any cognitive decline. In fact, I'm assuming that within the next probably decade or so, cannabis will become a standard of care for treatment of all cognitive decline processes. And so I'm really happy to say that we finally have a really good study, the first one. Now, it's not a absolute evidence. It's a first in, I'm sure, many studies to come that demonstrating that people who consume cannabis in an older age tend to have a healthier brain, in essence. They basically smarter. They decline cognitively slower, and accordingly, let's take a look at the evidence. So I'm going to, as usual, share my screen, and I'm going to show you. Now, this is really early preliminary data. So first of all, it was published in this Pain Network newsletter, and then I found the actual article. So the actual article right now is available at Research Square. So this is a preprint. It's in a Nature portfolio. So I'm sure as soon as it comes out under the actual auspices of this very well respected journal, obviously Nature is one of the top journals in the world, that I'll make sure I post the appropriate link. So this is a preprint. So yeah, it's possible that minor things will change. So I'm going to put this on the actual screen. So what you're seeing here is an actual PDF file. And again, I'll make sure you have all the links. So this is coming from Georgia Institute of Technology. And also there's also some other colleagues in China and Colorado. And so the study took 25,000 participants, and they looked at the comprehensive relationship between the cannabis normal aging and cognitive function. And as I'll show you in detail, basically, they found a really important correlation. And this correlation demonstrates that, in conclusion, our study offers valuable insight into potential influence on cannabis on brain aging and cognitive performance. The results suggest that cannabis users display brain network characteristics typically associated with younger brains, along with enhanced cognitive abilities, highlighting a potential modulatory role of cannabis and endocannabinoid in neurodegenerative process. So, it is large data set, right? It's 25,000 people. Now, it is not a controlled trial. So it's really important to understand. So basically, it's a assessment of what people are taking. So they were asking participants, well, have you used cannabis? What form are you using? How much are you using, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a complex data assessment. And obviously, there's a lot of potential biases. Biases can cause real issues for any study, particularly for a study like this. Now, they have used very sophisticated methods of analysis. I'm not going to bother you with this neuromark framework, but just suffice to say, for this type of research, it's a standard of care, and it's a very high quality research, within what it was done. So it's really an association that they identified. Now, it's very critical to understand that association is not a causation. And because it's not a causation, it's probably the first study of this magnitude and this nature to show this. Now, of course, the next studies should be some kind of a more prospective study where you give a control group a cannabis, and actual treatment group, you give cannabis, and then control group takes placebo, and then you're comparing. Now, the problem with a study like this, it will be a very long study. Cognitive impairment develops very slowly. It's hard to assess it, especially hard to look at the preventive data. So we're probably not going to have control trial looking into this anytime soon. However, what I expect this study will trigger is an actually look into patients with existing cognitive decline. What if we give them the cannabis? What we already know from prior studies, that couple of things critically happening in the brain of people who are getting cognitive decline. First of all, their endocannabinoid tone, so their endogenous production of cannabis molecules, is basically drops down to almost zero very quickly within just a few years of the process. We do know that the molecule that lyses, that destroys the endocannabinoid, seems to go up. And it goes up very quickly within first few years of, particularly, we're talking about Alzheimer's disease. And as a result, the brain has a lot less available endocannabinoid molecules. Now, what this study is showing it, that's not only that, it also appears that cannabis tends to support overall receptors that are and the cannabinoid receptors, and also likely how I'm interpreting this in terms of the simple terms. So forget all this receptors, forget endocannabinoid, it's too complicated in the sense, although it is the science behind this data. But I think what's actually happening on a more practical level is the following. Think of it this way. When you take any psychotropic medications, there is a difference in perception. There is a instigation of a new experience, even if you're doing something the same way. Anybody who have ever gotten high or intoxicated on cannabis will know that if, let's say, you're watching a movie, you may be giggling, or you're going to have a different experience. People who like to do art, for example, while using cannabis, they will say, I perceive my work differently. I'm engaged with my art and my projects differently. So that difference is the brain's different interpretation of what's happening to you in the moment. And that probably creates this enhanced connectivity in the brain. We do know that experiencing new things later in life is extremely protective against any cognitive decline, whether it's Alzheimer's or other forms. So my prediction of all of this as a topic is not changing. So I'm gonna mark my word. I'm recording this in the summer of 2025. That in the summer of 2035, we may even have actual medications or extracts of cannabinoids being used for neurocognitive decline. Now, of course, I don't know the details. I don't know whether or not what particular endocannabinoids we will have. The current data we have on treating Alzheimer's with cannabinoids is that it substantially improves behavior. Unfortunately, nearly 100% of all the patients who have Alzheimer's disease eventually going to have something we call a neurobehavioral disturbances. So basically, agitation, sleep disturbances, change in circadian rhythm, aggression. People sometimes hit even their caregivers or even the family members because they either paranoid or they perceive threat which is not there, and they act out on that. So cannabinoids are very effective at managing this. In fact, they're more effective and a lot safer than any other available treatments, to the point where in certain countries like Canada, for example, the cannabinoids are approved as one of the methods of treating neurobehavioral disturbances in advanced or moderate advanced Alzheimer's disease. In our practice, we use it quite a lot. There are different ways to think about it. Of course, we don't recommend smoking for cannabis for any older adults, but you don't have to. You can take gummies, you can take tinctures, oils, sublingual oils, or oral oils. All of those things would work. It's beyond the scope of this video to tell you specifics, but I would say we always start with just a couple of milligrams, couple times a day of THC equivalent mixed with other. Particularly if it's later in the day, we like to give CBG. If it's an earlier in the day, we like to give CBD. It's a little bit less sedating. And so you never give unopposed THC. You always have a mix of cannabinoids. And of course, we always use full extracts rather than using, isolates. Isolates have no entourage effect. Entourage effect is when you combine other molecules with a primary active molecule enhancing the efficacy. So it's a fascinating new direction. I'm, of course, recording this as soon as I came across this article and had some time to record this today. I hope this was helpful, and see you soon. And hopefully you're enjoying the rest of the summer of 2025. Again, I'm mentioning these dates because I hope that in 10 years, when people watch this on a YouTube, that you will understand that. Well, anyway, it's for myself too. I want to see if I'm actually going to be right that cannabis will be entering part of treatment of Alzheimer's disease and treatment of other neurocognitive disorders, as I think it should. And of course, again, this is my interpretation of early data. I think there's a lot more research has to be done to make sure that this is correct. And meantime, we will be using continuously a variety of cannabinoids for our Alzheimer's patients, mostly for symptom management for now. But of course, as part of that process, we will be recording data, we will be gaining knowledge, and I think that within next few years, we'll have some basic sense where should the research be and how should we figure out dosing precisely, which endocannabinoid molecules are most important. For example, I'm a big believer in something called CBDV and also something called CBG. So I think those acidic forms, CBGA and CBDA particularly, as well as THCA. So I think those are some of the endocannabinoids that we're probably going to start seeing discussed a lot within the context of cognitive health. If you are a cannabis user and you're in your second half of life, use it responsibly, but also hopefully this will help you to be guided, that there is clear and growing amount of evidence showing pretty strong benefits. Take care. See you soon. Bye.